Margie here. Are you ready to learn what are the most common mistakes that people make when it comes to their osteoporosis exercise program? Well, if so, you are in the right place because this is the topic that unfortunately I see too many people performing exercises incorrectly. And so today I wanted to shed light on this and really share what mistakes people make and what can be done. So stay tuned. I'm so glad to be joining you today, and this is such an important topic because I don't want anybody getting injured because they're not doing their exercise program properly. So before we get started, what I decided to do today, I was at my ONERO exercise program, and the instructor is Dr. Claudia Tamas, who's my friend and colleague. And I asked Claudia, I wanted to get her opinion on what she thought were the three most common mistakes that she sees when it comes to people performing their osteoporosis exercises. So what I'm going to do, I have two clips. I have one from Dr. Claudia, and then also I interviewed one of the women in the ONERO program on what she learned she was doing incorrectly. So I'm going to start with those two clips, and then I'll come back and we'll dive into this topic even in more detail.
I'm here with Dr. Claudia Tamas, and I asked her the question, she sees so many people come to ONERO, and she's been a physical therapist who's worked with so many patients. So, Dr. Claudia, what do you see? Give me the three most common things you see that people do that they really need to avoid if they're going to have good posture and really be able to progress with their exercise program.
Hi, Margie. This is a great opportunity to throw out there those, top three corrections that I usually make. I would say the top one, the first one would be the forward head, where our heads are sitting on our body. So the forward head looks like this, right? And it's usually due to technology or sitting at the desk. So the correction looks like putting your ear above your shoulder into retraction. One easy exercise we'll show is the index finger on your chin and the thumb on your sternum. And moving away from that index fingers, then will position you right above the shoulder where you would need to be. Then the second one also has to do with forward posture, because gravity will just do that. It will make us fall forward. So the thoracic spine moving forward, either from sitting at a desk or from using technology. So exercising in these positions will then compromise the resilience of the spine. So you want to find yourself upright, the ear right above the shoulder. And I would say then the third one that kind of goes with this triad would be the forward shoulder. So the shoulder fallen anteriorly and tilted. So seeing people doing pull downs this way, or sometimes I see them doing pull-ups with their shoulder up and forward. Those are probably the most common and most destructive.
And what do you tell them when they're doing that forward? What's your cueing so that someone who's doing that can make the adjustments? What would you say is the best thing to tell people?
Yeah, so the observing these landmarks, like the ear right above the shoulder, so you can go ahead and do that correction. That's super easy. So ear right above the shoulder. And then if you look to the side of the body, you can then align the ear, the shoulder, the hip, the knee, and the ankle. So if that shoulder's forward is not going to align with your hip. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Claudia.
You're welcome.
And this is Alice Homan, who's one of the people who's in my ONERO program. And so, Alice, why don't you just tell us what you found? What mistakes were you making that you've changed?
I was making all three mistakes that Dr. Tamas just spoke about, with the forward head, the forward shoulders, and the rounded back. I have been doing the exercises that she encouraged us to do, and I do find that my posture is much better than it was. I mean, it's still a work in progress, but I'm feeling better, and I am very conscious of it.
Oh, that's great. What about with lifting? Did you have to change some of your form when you were lifting?
I had to change almost everything I've ever done while lifting. With the deadlift, it was a very difficult thing to learn, but once I learned it,
What were you doing incorrectly? So that was the main, like,
Rounding my back.
rounding your back. And that's what I see all the time. And I don't think people realize how dangerous that can be.
And the same with your squats. When you're squatting, I was squatting leaning forward instead of in that horizontal position.
Do you feel you have more strength? Like, what do you feel?
I have so much more and confidence and hope.
Oh, that's so great. Well, thanks, Alice.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So let's just review a little bit what Dr. Claudia talked about. So she talked about the forward head posture, and that is so common. And I'm actually going to share my slides with you because I wanted to just give you a little more information about this. So let's just go to the slides. What you need to know is there's 3 curves in the spine. There's an inward curve in the neck, in the cervical spine, an outward curve in the thoracic spine, the middle back. That's what can cause that excess rounding, and an inward curve in the low back. And what we want to do in our exercise program is maintain these curves. That's called neutral posture. So just keep that in the back of your mind. Okay, so what she showed was a forward head posture, and it doesn't have to be on an older person. This happens at all ages. So ideally, we want the ear and the shoulder in alignment. And what happens so often as the head is forward and the ear is in front of the shoulder. So that's one thing we want to be aware of. We want to be aware of where our ear and our shoulder are. And you can have someone take a picture of you sideways or look in the mirror and just get a sense. You can also, if you're standing against the wall, see, is there space in between your head and the wall? All right, so what is the problem, if the head's forward? So ideally, the head weighs approximately 12 pounds, and normally that 12 pounds is transmitted down through the spine. But if the head is forward, now that 12 pounds has to be multiplied by the distance that's away, if you remember from physics. So now that 12 pounds can be 36 pounds on the area of your upper back most prone to fracture. So what Dr. Claudia talked about is one phenomenal exercise, bringing the chin tuck. The chin is going back. And she showed it a really great way where she had one finger here on the chin and one finger here on the sternum, the thumb. And then she had you bring your chin back. So there's lots of ways to do that. It's not forward. It's just going straight back. Shouldn't hurt at all. You can also take your hand and put that in the inward curve in your neck. And so when you do that, you'll feel the curve go into your neck. And that's one just great way to also perform that exercise. And I always like to do around 3 to 5 repetitions, like 3 to 5 times a day. But it's a really good exercise throughout the day to remind yourself not to have that forward head posture. But if we look, for those of you who have slides, but you don't, if you're just listening, that's okay. There's a picture I'm showing that the head's forward. But if we just brought the head back, in this situation, it wouldn't be all that needs to be done because this person's back is rounded. So what I want you to do now, if you're sitting, if you can, just round out your low back. Just round it out and see what happens to your head. It throws everything off. So oftentimes, we also have to address, I talked about those 3 curves, the low back curve. This is how people sit. They sit slouched with their low back rounded. So we want to maintain the normal curve in our low back. And I'm just showing a picture of someone crossing your legs. So if you crossed your legs right now, you'd feel that also rounds out your low back, and that throws you into that forward head posture, as well as compresses your chest and even your shoulders. And this is a picture, I'm just showing a picture of taking either a towel roll or a lumbar roll. For some people, this is helpful. And it goes right in the low back curve. Or if you're on a cushy couch or anything, if you take a towel, roll it up so it supports that curve. But my favorite way is to really do it without a support, is to learn how to sit unsupported. And what you can do, we can do this right now. So what I want you to do is I want you to take your hands just for a minute and sit on them, and you'll feel two bones. Those are what's called the sit bones. And so what I want you to do, just feel them for a minute. And what I want you to do is round out your back, and you'll feel them go forward, those bones. And if you overarch, you'll feel them go back. So we don't want to be either way. We don't want to be rounded because that throws us in that forward head position and compresses our shoulders and can cause all sorts of impingements. And the other thing we don't want to be overarched. So here's a great way to do this. Pretend this is a Feldenkrais exercise. Moshe Feldenkrais, so brilliant. And he had all these ways to retrain the body. So if you do something you've never done before, it opens new pathways and it helps you really break up some old patterns. So what I want you to do is pretend that you're sitting on a clock. The face of a clock is on your chair. Have your feet sort of wide apart, like wider than shoulder width, so you're really stable. And what I want you to do now is I want you to go from 12 to 6. So move your pelvis back and forward, just really the pelvis. You're going to close your eyes and you're going to go in smaller and smaller increments till you stop. And this is just a great way, because when you stop, you're usually in a nice, stable position. So if I were to push on your shoulders, you'd be nice and stable. And that's what we want. So this is just a nice way to find that center. You go back and forth with your eyes closed until you stop. Then the other thing, just as a good exercise also, because so often we get stiff in our pelvis, is to just move to all the numbers on the clock. You can practice that one way and then the other way. Hey, Margie here. High quality supplements are a big part of a comprehensive osteoporosis program. To help you, I offer a significant discount every day in my supplement store through Fullscript. Fullscript has the most extensive catalog of professional grade supplements and wellness products I've ever found. So all you need to do is go to tinyurl.com. That's tinyurl.com/supplements4less. And you'll get to my Fullscript store. And in there, you'll see my favorite bone building supplements. So make sure to check it out. And the link will also be in the show notes. So let's get back to the show. I wanted to talk about something because Claudia talked about then the rounding of the upper back. She talked about three things: the head being forward, the upper back being rounded, and the shoulders being rounded. Well, this has real serious consequences. There was a study done where it was called the Fracture Intervention Trial. So it was 3,108 women. And they looked at kyphosis, people who had hyperkyphosis, that's more rounding in the back. And they found just that alone is a significant contributor to mobility impairment, regardless of your bone density or vertebral fractures. And they also felt that your increased kyphosis, that's that rounding in the upper back, that angle is a marker for increased fracture risk. And so they also found that people who had increased kyphosis, again, had greater balance abnormalities. They had more fractures. They had increase in body sway, gait unsteadiness, and they had, risk of issues with their bone density and fractures. So this is really important, this kyphosis. But the good news is that exercise has been shown to improve kyphosis. So they did this work was done by Wendy Katzman, and they did randomized controlled trial where spine strengthening exercises and posture training for over 6 months reduced kyphosis compared to a control group. And also the targeted kyphosis specific exercise program can be an effective treatment option for older individuals who have hyperkyphosis. So the good news is we can improve our posture. So we definitely do not want to do exercises in a rounded posture with our back rounded or our shoulders rounded. And as well as what I talked about, we also have to maintain our low back in a neutral position. So what are some other precautions the other thing I didn't want to mention is when you're rounded too, and you try to lift your arms up, you're not going to have the same mobility. If my arm's here, I have full motion. If I'm here, I'm stuck there. That is how people get impingement. I also just wanted to review, for those who haven't seen this already, the osteoporosis precautions. So what do you need to know when you are doing an exercise program that sometimes people people aren't aware of, and they can really hurt themselves? So I'm going to show you these exercises, and while you're looking at them, think, is this something that someone with osteoporosis should do? So this person, I'm just going to mention, if you don't have the slides, it's a person who's standing, bending forward, rounding out their back, touching the toes. I'm not going to tell you until the end. This person's doing a windmill where they're bending forward and they're touching their opposite toe. So the right hand is going to the left foot, again, rounding out their back. This person is doing, like a crunch where she's rounding her back out. And this person's doing an exercise at the health club where there's a bar in front of her chest, which is abdominal strengthening, but again, rounding at her back. So the answer is, if you have osteoporosis or osteopenia, these exercises are contraindicated. You do not want to do anything that causes rounding of the back. And the reason is, there's this one study that was done quite a while ago, but they'll never repeat it. And they looked at people who had osteoporosis and the risk of fractures over a 1 to 6 year period of time. So they had people doing extension, which is going backwards, and they had a 16% fracture rate. Here goes. People who did flexion, which is all the rounding that I just showed you, had an 89% fracture rate. Combination 53%, and the control group had a 67%. So 89% that they were only doing those rounding exercises. And the reason is this: if we look at the picture in this slide, or we just think of the spine, we think of the front of the spine and the back of the spine, as you can feel in your back, if you're going down your back. Ideally, they're nice and square shaped, the vertebrae. But what happens with osteoporosis is they become wedge shaped, and the wedge is in the front. This is with fractures. So now, if there's a wedge shape and you bend it forward, all of the force is on the front of the vertebrae. That's where the fractures occur. So the flexion and that bending and that rounding is putting more force on an area that's already weakened. So we don't want to do that. So this is from BoneFit, and this is from Osteoporosis Canada, and this is their most current guideline. So what they say to limit is repeated, sustained, weighted, end range, rapid, forceful, or combined. So the motions they want you to limit, the end range, is flexion, which is all that forward bending, rotation, so end range rotation, and side bending, because that puts a lot of torque on the spine. And the flexion we showed puts force on the front of the vertebrae, which is most apt, which is the area that's already could have a wedge fracture, and that's where the fractures occur. So also, they want you to reduce the accumulation of flexion, slouching, and rotations during like ADLs, your activities of daily living, and your work. So it's not only limit this during exercise, you want to limit this in your daily life as well. And the last thing they say is care, and when you have to take care when you're lowering a heavy weight from overhead. And all the time, I'll be at senior centers, and they're doing touching your toes. They're doing windmills. These are not safe for people with osteoporosis. It can increase your risk of fracture. And this was just for those who are seeing slides we had created in the state of New Jersey. We saw so many people getting injured, and I work with the Interagency Council on Osteoporosis, that what we did, we created a handout for all the exercise instructors in the state, because they didn't know this. They didn't know that if you have a person that you're working with osteoporosis, we do not want them touching their toes. We do not want them doing crunches. We do not want them doing windmills, so those motions that I talked about, you want to avoid. So let's just review. We want to avoid that forward head posture. And one of the great ways is the exercise that Claudia showed you, that chin tuck exercise, doing that throughout the day and catching ourselves. catching ourselves. Another good thing I didn't mention is always visualize lengthening. So what you can do is you can think that your head is attached to a helium balloon and your spine is always lengthening when you're doing anything just throughout the day. That visualization works so well. We also want to catch ourselves if our back is rounded and if our shoulders are rounded. Now, sometimes, we're in a certain position and we can just gradually improve that. And sometimes there are changes that if we've had a fracture that we may not be able to, to totally reverse. But that's a lot of times when a physical therapist comes in handy, because you can see a physical therapist and they can say, oh, you know what? I need to help you work on some of the soft tissue, and work individually with someone so that you can get stretched out so that you are able to improve. So the head, the shoulders, the upper back, make sure the inward curve in that low back, we want to maintain that and not round out during our daily activities. So to learn more, I do have a handout that goes into, it was a program I did called Improve Your Posture in 2 weeks, where I go over these exercises that you can easily put into your life. So that's a free handout that will be in the show notes. That's number one. Number two, Dr. Claudia Tamas, if you live in New Jersey, she has really a phenomenal, the ONERO program, which is so great, teaching you, wonderful posture as well as this phenomenal strength training program that's been shown to increase bone density. So if you live in New Jersey, she's in Somerset, New Jersey. I'll put the information in the show notes. I've been doing this now since April. I just can't get over the program. It's so good. But also working with a physical therapist. There's so many ways that you can improve your posture, your bone density, your flexibility. It's just such a win-win getting involved in an exercise program. And also Dr. Claudia Tamas did a program with my group, and it was on activating core musculature for strength training in life. So it was really great, teaching you how you can stabilize properly, stabilize your pelvic floor, do the proper breathing during strength training. So that's available as an on-demand class. And it was really, really great. Everybody loved it. So that's available. I'll put the link in the show notes. And currently we're just finishing a program in a 6-week osteoporosis essential exercise program with Dr. Sherry Betts. And she goes into everything, all the fundamentals you need to know about posture, bending, lifting. It's really been outstanding. I personally can't get over how great it is, and the response, people are loving it. So let's see, when this comes out, there'll probably be 2 more live classes that are happening in November. But don't worry if it's after the fact, the whole class will be on demand, and it's just a wonderful class to really learn all the basics and be able to put all that into your exercise program. So I have all those great things for you. And I just really wanted to let you know, because I see it too often, and it just makes me so sad when I see somebody injured unnecessarily. So I just wanted to bring this to your awareness and just look around. Also, if you see your friend, let them know, but just sort of be conscious of your own posture and how you're doing your exercises. So thank you so much for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.